When world leaders came together in 2015 to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, we all knew the challenge ahead of us. And we've made progress, but it has been hard-won, uneven, and fragile. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how fragile. Today, humanity faces a stark and urgent choice. Do we allow these fractures to grow, or do we break through to a greener, safer, and more equitable future? At Economist Impact, we're dedicated to driving positive change by using data and evidence to better understand the biggest issues and evaluate the best solutions. And we've been closely tracking action on the SDGs. Today, as we explore progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, let's remember, we know what we have to do, and we have the tools. The question is, do we have the will to act and keep the promise of Agenda 2030? Let's start with Goal 1, eliminating extreme poverty by 2030. In just 18 months, the COVID-19 pandemic erased 5 years' worth of progress, pushing more than 97 million people back into extreme poverty. If we don't take action now to right our course, we risk arriving at 2030 with more than 600 million people living in extreme poverty. We also know we can't move forward without women and girls. Since 2015, we've made progress on gender equality, but not nearly enough. Maternal mortality continues to fall, but we need to move more than 4 times faster if we're to achieve our target of 70 deaths per 100,000 live births by 2030. In politics, women now hold 26% of seats in national parliaments. But at the current rate of improvement, it will take no fewer than 40 years to achieve gender parity. And when we look at the workforce, women are still grossly underrepresented, with less than half of women participating, compared to more than 70% of men. This hasn't budged since 2015. COVID has only exacerbated these disparities. Female-dominated industries were disproportionately affected across both formal and informal sectors. The number of women employed declined by 54 million in 2020. As COVID impoverishes communities, closes schools, and reduces access to reproductive health care, it's estimated that 10 million more girls than previously projected are at a risk of becoming child brides through 2030. The risk of violence has also risen. Before the pandemic, we knew that 1 in 3 women would experience violence at least once in her lifetime. During the pandemic, some countries reported a devastating 5-fold increase in calls to helplines. When we talk about gender equality, we tend to address it through this humanitarian lens. But equality doesn't just benefit individuals. It benefits whole societies and economies. Achieving gender equality could unlock $12 trillion. The opposite is also true. Nations that fail women fail. One powerful tool to ensure equality of opportunity across communities and around the world is connectivity. And this is an area where we've made tremendous progress. 4 billion people around the world are connected to the internet, 1 billion of whom came online since 2015. But COVID has acted sort of like a time machine, hurtling us all forward into a digital future in which we access our jobs, our education, healthcare, financial services, even our friends and family, all online. So for those 3 billion people still unconnected, the costs have never been higher. 1/3 of children globally were unable to access remote learning during COVID lockdowns, and we saw the immediate impact. 101 million children fell below minimum reading proficiency levels in 2020. We also know the returns we get from investments in connectivity. They're massive. Connecting schools to the internet boosts GDP by up to 20% in least connected countries. It also shows how intertwined the SDGs are. An increase in connectivity can contribute to increases in educational outcomes, prosperity, and gender equality. But a prerequisite to meaningful connectivity is access to reliable, affordable electricity. And after years of good progress, we've lost ground here as well. In 2020, we saw the number of people without electricity in Africa increase for the first time in 6 years. Without major changes today, we could reach 2030 with 660 million people living without access to power. Expanding electricity must be addressed within the context of the ongoing worsening crisis that is climate change. Only by unleashing the power of clean energy will we be able to end energy poverty while protecting our planet. After a brief pause in 2020 when we all stayed home, emissions are back on the rise. Climate change is not a future challenge. We're already feeling its impact. The economic costs from extreme weather and wildfires were $1.3 trillion over the last 10 years. That's a 40% increase from the previous decade. And if we continue on this course, we will create an unlivable planet, with the greatest suffering borne by those least responsible. In 2015, the world came together in Paris to commit to limit global warming, and we've made important progress since then. The cost of renewables continues to decline. Clean power is now often the most affordable option, and low-carbon fuels have surpassed coal as the largest source of electricity generation. But as we look towards COP26 in Glasgow this November, it must be with clear eyes. Our policies are grossly insufficient to meet the present challenge. Our research tells us that more governments and businesses are turning their attention to this issue than ever before, but it's not enough. We must act now to prevent the worst. COVID was a wake-up call and a model for what's possible. It showed us what happens when an abstract threat becomes very real. In 2020 alone, governments mobilized and deployed $14 trillion in pandemic support. Through unprecedented public and private collaboration, we developed and deployed safe and effective vaccines faster than anyone imagined. We did it because we had to. A sustainable, inclusive future demands we act with the same urgency. Governments, businesses, civil society working together. To achieve the promise of Agenda 2030, we will need partnerships and collective action, technology and innovation, effective institutions and delivery mechanisms, better data to set baselines and track our progress, and a relentless focus on our responsibility to future generations and to those most at risk of being left behind. We are 1 year into the decade of action. It is time to act.